The air was thick with tension as Kale and the Iron Ember moved through the dark tunnels beneath the Elven city. Their steps were silent, the only sounds the soft scrape of boots on stone and the distant hum of the heart of Braxis, which Kale carried wrapped tightly in cloth. The heart's energy seemed to pulse with every step he took, as though it was alive and aware of the danger ahead. The path was narrow and winding, but Kale didn't falter. They were close now, only a few more turns until they reached the council hall, a heart of elven power. He could feel the weight of what they were about to do. They weren't just going to fight. They were going to strike at the very core of the elves' rule. As they neared the council hall, Mirren spoke quietly, her voice barely a whisper. "Stay sharp," she said. "The elves have eyes everywhere. The moment we make our move, they'll be on us." Kale nodded, gripping his weapon tightly. The humans had trained hard, preparing for this moment. Each of them knew the stakes. They had no room for mistakes. They reached a narrow passage that led directly under the council hall. The stone walls were old, worn smooth by centuries of use. Kale's breath quickened. This was the moment. They had no more time to waste. With one last glance at the others, he nodded. Myron led the way, her knowledge of the tunnels guiding them through the shadows. They moved quickly but quietly, slipping past old traps and hidden doors, avoiding the guards who patrolled above them. Kale could almost feel the eyes of the elves above, as though they knew something was coming. Then they reached a large chamber beneath the council hall. It was empty, but the air was thick with the sense of power that had been built there over centuries. The heart of Braxis seemed to pulse stronger as if it recognized the power that surrounded them. "This is it," Kale whispered. "We strike now," Mirren said, her eyes sharp with focus. "Take out the defenses first. Once we have control of this place, we can deal with the council." Kale nodded. He could feel the fire in his heart, the courage he had never known before. This was their chance to change everything. No longer would they hide in the shadows. Now they would stand tall. The first wave of elves came down the hallway. The Iron Ember didn't hesitate. They were ready. Kale rushed forward, his weapon raised. With a single swift motion, he knocked the first elf off balance and sent him crashing into the wall. The others followed, striking with precision and strength. They fought with everything they had, driven by the knowledge that their freedom depended on this moment. The elves were skilled, but they were not prepared for the humans' determination. Each strike from Kale felt like a hammer falling, each movement filled with purpose. The elven soldiers were quick to regroup, but they couldn't match the speed and ferocity of the humans, who had learned to fight in the shadows, unnoticed and underestimated. As the last elf fell to the ground, Kale stood in the center of the chamber, his heart racing. They had taken the first step. The elves had been pushed back. But this was only the beginning. The true challenge lay ahead. They would have to face the council itself. The real battle had just begun. The chamber was still, the silence thick with the weight of their victory. Kale stood at the center, his breath coming fast from the battle. The last of the Elven soldiers had fallen, but the fight was far from over. The council hall was ahead, and inside were the most powerful elves, those who controlled the magic that protected the city. "We need to move quickly," Mirren said, her voice low and urgent. She scanned the chamber, her eyes darting to the shadows as if expecting more elves to appear at any moment. "The council will know we're here soon. We can't afford to wait." Kale nodded, clutching the heart of Braxis tightly in his hands. The hum of its power seemed louder now, as if it sensed the danger ahead. They had to act before the elves had a chance to regroup. With a signal from Mirren, the Iron Ember moved forward. The tunnels beneath the council hall twisted and turned, leading them deeper into the heart of elven power. The air grew colder the further they went, and the stone walls seemed to close in around them. It was as though the city itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what they would do. After what felt like hours, they reached a large, circular chamber. The walls were covered in strange symbols, glowing faintly in the dim light. At the center of the room stood a massive stone platform, and above it, a glowing crystal pulsed with energy. This was the heart of the council's power, the source of the magic that had kept the elves in control for so long. Kale felt a shiver run down his spine. The heart of Braxis pulsed stronger in his hands, its energy almost vibrating with power. The two artifacts, the heart of Braxis and the crystal, felt connected in a way Kale couldn't understand. He didn't know what would happen when the two powers met, but he knew this was their chance to bring down the elves once and for all. "This is it," Kale whispered, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at the edges of his mind. "We need to destroy the crystal." Mirren nodded, but there was a look of uncertainty in her eyes. Destroying it won't be easy. The elves have protected this place for centuries. If we do this, there's no going back. We don't have a choice, Kale said, his voice filled with resolve. The elves will never stop. They'll keep us in chains until the end of time if we don't act now. The Iron Ember gathered around the platform, preparing for the next step. Kale stepped forward, feeling the energy of the heart of Braxis surge through him. He placed it gently on the stone surface, and as soon as the two objects were close, a bright light erupted from both. The room shook, the walls vibrating with the force of the power that now flowed through the air. Kale stepped back, shielding his eyes from the brightness. The heart of Braxis and the elven crystal pulsed together, creating a whirlwind of magic and energy. It was as if the world itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. The power of the two artifacts clashed, and with a deafening crack, the crystal shattered. The room erupted in a blinding light, and for a moment, Kale couldn't see or hear anything. All that existed was the overwhelming power of the heart of Braxis and the destruction of the elves' magic. When the light faded, Kale looked around. The crystal was gone, shattered into dust, and the power that had held the elves in control was no more. They had won, for now. But Kale knew the war was far from over. The elves would retaliate. They always did. The silence in the chamber was overwhelming. Kale stood still, his heart pounding in his ears, watching the remnants of the shattered crystal slowly fade into dust. The power of the elves had crumbled before them, but that didn't mean the fight was over. No, this was just the beginning. We did it, Mirren said, her voice quiet but filled with awe. The crystal is gone. The magic that bound the city, it's gone. Kale nodded, but his eyes were fixed on the darkened sky above. Through the cracks in the stone ceiling, he could see the faint glimmer of light beginning to dawn over the horizon. A new day was breaking, and with it, a new world. A world where humans no longer lived in the shadow of elves. But Kale knew the path ahead was still dangerous. The elves would fight back, and they would do everything in their power to reclaim what they had lost. We can't stay here, Kale said, turning to Mirren. They'll send more soldiers. We need to move quickly, gather the others, and get out before they trap us in here. The Iron Ember, ever ready for battle, moved swiftly to gather their things. They knew that the elves would not let this act of rebellion go unanswered. The council had fallen, but the elves were not weak. They would rally, and they would strike back with everything they had. The humans, for the first time in years, had sparked a flame of hope. But it was a flame that could easily be extinguished if they weren't careful. Kale's hand tightened around the heart of Braxis. It was still warm in his palm, still pulsing with energy. In this moment, it was more than just an artifact. It was a symbol of their fight, a symbol of everything they had sacrificed to get here, and it was his responsibility to see it through. Let's go, Mirren urged, motioning to the others. The group moved through the tunnels quickly, avoiding the traps and passages that might lead the elves to them. Kale couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, though. Every step felt like it might be their last. But they pushed forward, each step taking them further away from the heart of elven power. As they emerged from the tunnels and into the open city streets, Kale looked around. The city of Varelian had always been beautiful, its towers reaching high into the sky, its streets lined with delicate statues and glowing lights. But now, everything felt different. It felt vulnerable. The elves' grip on the city had been shattered, and in its place was an uncertain future. The humans of the city had begun to gather, sensing that something had changed. Whispers spread like wildfire, and as more people came out into the streets, they saw the result of their rebellion. They had toppled the elves' power. They had struck a blow for freedom. The dawn of a new age was upon them. But Kale knew this wasn't the end. The elves would retaliate. They wouldn't give up their power so easily. But now, humans had a chance. Now, they could rise. This is just the beginning, Kale whispered to himself as he watched the humans in the streets begin to organize. This fight, it's not over yet. The sound of hammers echoed through the forge, ringing like metal bells in the cold morning air. Kale Durin, a young human apprentice, moved quickly between the fire and the anvil. His hands were rough, marked by years of hard work. He never spoke unless spoken to. That was the rule. Humans didn't ask questions, they served. Above the forge, in the high towers of Varelian, the elves walked like they ruled the world. Their long robes shimmered with gold thread. They never looked down unless it was to give an order or a punishment. To them, humans were tools, clever, useful, but never equal. Cal knew better. He saw how elves feared change. They built cities that never moved and clung to power like vines on old stone. Humans, though, changed. They learned. And Cal had learned to listen to the walls, to the wind, and to the old stories. That day, something strange happened. While gathering coal near the base of the forge, Cal's foot slipped on a loose stone. The ground shook softly, just once. He bent down and found a crack in the floor he had never seen before. Curiosity burned in him, sharp as the forge's flame. He looked around. No elves in sight. He pried the stone loose. Beneath was a dark hole, just big enough for a man to crawl through. He hesitated. He knew if he was caught, he could be whipped or worse. But something pulled at him, like a voice whispering from the deep earth. He lowered himself into the hole. The air below was cold and still. Old dust floated in the torchlight. He walked slowly through a narrow tunnel, guided only by the dim glow of his lantern. Then he saw it. A small chamber opened before him, carved from black stone. In the center stood a pedestal, and on it something glowed. It was a strange object, round and smooth, covered in silver lines like veins. It hummed quietly, not like magic, but like it was alive. Cal reached out. The moment his fingers touched the object, his head filled with images, fire raining from the sky, warriors made of light, and voices speaking in a language he did not know but somehow understood. He fell to his knees, gasping. The vision ended just as suddenly as it began. His heart pounded. He didn't know what he had found, but he knew one thing for sure. This was not Elven. This was human. He wrapped the object in cloth and hid it under his coat. He climbed back to the forge, hands shaking, eyes wide. For the rest of the day, Cale worked in silence, but something had changed. The fire in the forge was no longer the hottest flame he knew. Something older and stronger now burned inside him. The city of Aurelian had never been more alive. The streets that were once filled with whispers of fear were now filled with shouts of defiance. Humans, once oppressed and downtrodden, had risen up. But despite the victory they had won, Cale knew the real battle was still ahead. The elves were not ones to surrender easily. It didn't take long for the elves to respond. Within days, the sky above the city grew darker. The city's walls were lined with elven soldiers, their armor gleaming in the light. The elves had gathered their forces, preparing to crush the humans' rebellion once and for all. Cale stood at the edge of the city, looking out at the approaching army. His hands tightened around the heart of Braxis. The power that had helped them break through the elves' defenses would now be their last hope. It had been a long journey, one that had cost them dearly. So many had fought and died to get here, and now it was time to make the final stand. "We can win this," Mirren said, her voice steady as she approached Cale. "They've been weakened. We know their weaknesses now. We can fight them with their own arrogance." Cale looked at her, his eyes filled with determination. "We don't have much time. Once they reach the city, it will be over. We have to act fast." The Iron Ember, along with a growing number of human rebels, stood ready. They had spent the days since their victory preparing for this moment. Traps had been set, barricades raised, and every last man and woman had trained for this day. It was no longer just about survival. It was about proving that humanity had the strength to stand on its own, to fight for its future. As the elves marched closer, Cale felt the air around him grow heavy. He could sense the magic in the air, thick and oppressive. The elves' power was immense, but it had always been their greatest weakness. They believed their magic made them invincible, that no one could challenge them. Now that belief was about to be shattered. Cale turned to Mirren, his voice low but firm. "This is it. We'll need the heart of Braxis to break their defenses. We strike at the heart of their army, where their magic is the strongest. It's our only chance." Mirren nodded, her face set in grim determination. "We'll do it together." The battle began as the elven forces stormed the city gates, their warriors moving with precision and speed. But the humans were ready. They fought fiercely, their weapons and tactics honed by weeks of planning. With each wave, they pushed the elves back, their courage growing with every victory. As the elves reached the heart of the city, Cale and his team broke through their lines, heading straight for the source of their power. The heart of Braxis pulsed brightly in Cale's hands, guiding him toward the center of the elven magic. With a mighty cry, he held the heart high, unleashing its power. The ground trembled, and a massive surge of energy shot from the heart of Braxis, tearing through the elven defenses. The magic of the elves cracked and shattered, leaving them vulnerable. For the first time in centuries, the elves were truly defeated. The humans had won. Kale stood among the wreckage, his heart still racing, but his spirit lifted by the weight of their victory. The elves had fallen, their power broken, and in their place, a new world was rising. A world where humans were no longer ruled by others. The battle was over, but the war for freedom was just beginning. The whispers were no longer just from the humans. Even the elves, proud and untouchable, could feel something shifting beneath them. In the high towers of Aurelian, the leaders of the elven houses gathered in secret, their faces drawn tight with worry. The humans, once obedient and broken, had begun to fight back. Rumors of sabotage and uprising spread like wildfire, and the once safe walls of the elven city felt strangely vulnerable. Kale had noticed the change. Every day, it seemed, there were more and more elves in the streets, their eyes scanning the crowds for any sign of rebellion. The tension was thick in the air, and the quiet hum of the heart of Braxis seemed to pulse stronger every time the elves moved closer. The artifact felt alive in his hands, as if it recognized the growing storm. It was in one of these tense moments that Mirren approached him with a new plan. "The time has come," she said, her voice steady but serious. "We've been acting in the shadows long enough. We need to make them feel our strength. We need to strike directly at the heart of their power." Kale frowned. "What do you mean?" "We need to go to the High Council," she said. "The Council controls everything, the city's defenses, the magic that keeps the elves in power. If we can take them down, we break the elves' hold over the city." It was a bold plan. Too bold, Kale thought. The council was made up of the most powerful elves, beings who had lived for centuries. They controlled the magic that kept the city safe from harm. Attacking them would be a gamble, one that could cost them everything. But Mirren's eyes were clear, and her voice was filled with conviction. "We have the heart," she reminded him. "It's not just a weapon, it's a key. If we use it right, we can turn the tables." Kale didn't know if he fully believed her, but he trusted her. They had come this far together. "How do we get in?" he asked. "There are tunnels beneath the council hall," Mirren explained. "Old, forgotten paths that lead directly into the heart of their strongest defenses. If we can move quickly, we might catch them off guard." Kale nodded slowly. He could feel the weight of the decision. This wasn't just about fighting anymore. It was about bringing everything into the light, showing the elves that the humans weren't just slaves. They were a force to be reckoned with. That night, under the cover of darkness, the Iron Ember moved again. They gathered in the old tunnels beneath the city, each member ready for whatever lay ahead. The elves would be waiting for them, but Kale could feel something inside him, a fire that had been sparked long ago, beginning to grow. He knew the path ahead would be dangerous, but for the first time, he felt like they might actually have a chance. The humans were no longer just the oppressed. They were becoming something else, something more powerful. As they made their way toward the council hall, Kale looked back at the others, his heart beating faster with every step. This was it, the moment that could change everything. No matter what happened, they were not going to go back to being slaves. The days after Kale met the stranger moved faster than he could keep up with. The Iron Ember wasn't just a few rebels hiding in the dark corners of the city. It was a network, humans, half-elves, and even a few elves who had turned against their own kind. All of them were desperate for change, desperate for freedom. Kale had no choice now but to join them. He couldn't turn back. The weight of the heart of Braxis pulsed in his mind, a constant reminder that he had something powerful, but something dangerous. The artifact wasn't just an object. It was a key to something bigger, something he barely understood. One evening, Kale met with Mirren, the half-elf scholar he had seen in the market once. She was one of the few who believed in the old ways, the ways that existed before the elves took control. Her eyes were sharp, and she spoke with the calm confidence of someone who had spent years studying the elves' ancient texts. "We can't just wait around," Mirren said, standing across from Kale in a hidden meeting room deep beneath the city. "We need to act. The heart will give us the power, but we have to be smart. The elves are watching every move we make. If we strike too soon, they'll crush us." Kale nodded, holding the heart tightly in his hands. It was heavy, not just because of its size, but because of the responsibility that came with it. "What do we do then?" Mirren smiled slightly, almost as if she was waiting for him to ask that question. "We need to find out where the elves are vulnerable. Their greatest strength is their magic, but they're weak in other ways. Their cities are built on old foundations, full of hidden secrets. We can use that." Kale felt a spark of hope. They had been planning for so long, but hearing Mirren's words gave him something he hadn't felt in a long time. Belief. Maybe they could do this. The next few weeks were filled with preparation. Kale trained with the Iron Ember, learning how to fight with weapons he had never touched before. Swords, knives, and even crossbows. He had to become more than just a blacksmith. He had to become a warrior. But it wasn't just physical training. They taught him how to think like a soldier, how to plan, and how to strike when the time was right. In the dead of night, the Iron Ember moved through the city's secret tunnels, avoiding patrols and elves who walked the streets with their sharp eyes. Kale and his new allies sabotaged the elves' supply lines, destroyed their weapons caches, and set traps that confused the elves and made them doubt their own power. Each small victory built up the courage of the people, and slowly humans who had once kept their heads down began to raise their voices. Word spread. The elves felt it. Their arrogance began to crack. For the first time in years, they weren't sure if their rule was as secure as it had been. There was a change in the air, something brewing beneath the surface. And the humans, once afraid and silent, were starting to find their voices. Kale knew this was only the beginning. The real battle had not yet come, but the spark of rebellion had been lit. Soon it would become a flame that even the elves couldn't ignore. The days after Kale's discovery passed quietly, but a strange tension grew within him. He couldn't stop thinking about the glowing object hidden beneath his bed, wrapped carefully in cloth. Each night, after his work at the forge, he would sit in the darkness and hold it, feeling its strange hum pulse in his hands. There was something important about it, something ancient. But Kale couldn't tell anyone, not even his closest friends. Talking about it would only bring trouble. Elven soldiers patrolled the streets, their eyes always watching, waiting for any sign of rebellion. Humans who spoke against the elves often disappeared. Kale kept his secret, but he was not the only one who noticed things changing. In the shadows of Aurelian, whispers began to grow. Humans spoke of old days, when their people were free, when they ruled over the land, before the elves came. These whispers reached the ears of the Iron Ember, a secret group of humans who wanted to break free of their master's chains. They had been fighting in the shadows for years, but with each new day their hope was fading. One evening, after Kale had finished his work, a man appeared at the door of the forge. He was tall, with a cloak that covered most of his face. The man stepped inside quickly, glancing around to make sure no elves were watching. He looked at Kale with a sharp gaze, as if he knew exactly who he was. "You're the one, aren't you?" the man asked in a low voice. Kale felt his heart race. He had no idea who this was, but the man's words were clear. He knew something about the object. "What are you talking about?" Kale replied, trying to sound calm. The man stepped closer, lowering his voice even more. "The heart of Braxis," he whispered. "We've been looking for it. We know it's here. We know you found it." Kale stiffened, his eyes narrowing. This wasn't a chance encounter. These people had been watching him. He took a slow breath. "What do you want from me?" The man looked around once more before speaking. "We want to use it. The heart can change everything. With its power, we can stand against the elves. But we need someone like you, someone who has the courage to lead." Kel's mind raced. Part of him wanted to say no, to turn the man away and keep his secret safe. But another part of him, the part that had felt the power of the heart in his hands, wanted to believe. Maybe, just maybe, this was the spark that would set everything ablaze. I don't know how to lead," Kale admitted quietly. "I'm just a blacksmith's apprentice." The man smiled. "You don't need to lead yet, but the heart has chosen you. You're not just a blacksmith. You're the key." Kale's breath caught in his throat. For the first time, he felt a weight he couldn't ignore. It wasn't just about him anymore. There were others who were watching, waiting, and now they were asking him to fight. He looked at the man for a long moment, then nodded. "What do we do next?" The man's eyes shone with a spark of hope. "We fight, Kale. We rise."